Alban Berg lived from 1885 through 1935, and there's quite a bit about this composer that you can learn, or at least recall, by examining his name and his dates. We'll get to the elements of his name in just a moment, but let's take a look at his dates. Of course, you won't have to remember his exact dates of life, but if you take a look at how long he lived, you see that he lived to be only about 50 years old. Basically, he probably should have lived a lot longer than this, and that's relevant to his biography and certainly relevant to his output as a composer, as we shall soon see. Alban Berg was born in the former Austrian Empire, and as I've already mentioned to you in connection with Schoenberg, each of the composers in this unit whose first names begin with A were born in the Austrian Empire, and you can tell that simply by looking at Berg's name. In terms of social caste, he was a commoner, but he came from a very wealthy family. In fact, an inheritance that came to him in 1906, when he reached legal age, enabled him to do whatever he wanted to do without actually having to work to earn a living. And that's basically what he set out to do. If all had gone well, he probably would have spent his entire life doing what he started doing in 1906, and that is dabbling in music as an amateur. World War I, that conflict that was to redraw the map of Europe and to change the world forever, however, happened. And at the end of hostilities in 1909, the Austrian Empire had fallen, and with it the value of its currency. So people like Berg and his wife, who once were quite wealthy, no longer were. So he had to take up something in terms of employment in order to support himself and his family. And basically, since he was not prepared for any particular career, he ended up supporting himself for the rest of his life largely through musical odd jobs, giving music lessons, editing compositions, selling his own, etc. Although Berg is known and remembered for other types of music, for example, he wrote a violin concerto that gets performed an awful lot these days, when people think of him, they normally think of opera. And in fact, Berg is one of the most famous operatic composers of the 20th century. And we will examine a couple scenes from one of his works of this sort. Although Berg started out technically as a musical amateur, he certainly did not take his training in this art lightly, for he became a student of Schoenberg. And by the way, it's very easy for you to associate Berg with Schoenberg, isn't it? Take a look at the two names, Berg and Schoenberg. Notice that Berg's name is actually contained within Schoenberg's name. Okay, I know you're rolling your eyes again, but really this is a great way to remember this fact, that Berg is one of the students of Schoenberg. Now, we have already noted that his life was quite short, only about 50 years. Now, people were certainly living a lot longer than 50 years at the time that he died, so it was not at all normal for someone to die at that age. And it happens in the case of Berg that he had a bizarre premature death. Indeed, Berg died way before his time of an infection that he contracted as the result of an insect bite, a very weird way to go. Now, a premature death, whether bizarre or not, is certainly something that's worth taking note of when considering the life of an artist, a writer, or a musician, because one must wonder what that artist, writer, or musician would have done if he or she had lived his or her full length of life. And in fact, there is a clever way that you can remember that Berg did not live a long life, and that in fact you can remember also how he died. We've already seen that Berg is a part of Schoenberg, a lot shorter than Schoenberg. This might suggest to you something about his life. That is, that it was shorter than Schoenberg's. And if you take a look at Berg's last name, it begins with a B. It has 4 letters in it, just like bite, like the insect bite. And in fact, it begins with a B and ends with a G, which is the same letters as that you will find in the word bug. So if you think of Berg, bug, bite, you have a number of useful facts that you can use, and I promise you that these things actually will serve you when you sit down to take the exam on this unit.